In
Ronan
this
Gray
city,
didn't own a
every
life.
step is an
He
opportunity.
operated one.
We must seize
Every
them
part of it
with vision
ran
and
with the precision
determination.
of a system he had
Lead with
personally
purpose,
designed
and
and
success will
endlessly
follow.
refined. His company, Gray Capital, occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district that he had purchased outright at 36. He was 41 now, and the building still felt like the right decision. Clean, contained, answerable to no one but him. He had staff who anticipated his needs before he voiced them. He had a driver who knew his routes without being told. He had a personal trainer, a nutritionist, and a lawyer on permanent retainer who handled the smaller frictions of existing in the world so that Ronan didn't have to. He had no partner, no children that anyone knew of. He had relationships the way other men had appointments, scheduled, purposeful, and clearly concluded. People who got close to him learned, eventually, that close was a relative term. There was a version of Ronan that was charming, attentive, even warm in the way of a very controlled fire. And then there was the real version, the one behind the charm, that kept everything at a measured distance and called that distance wisdom. He had been living this way for years. He saw no reason it would change. Wednesday was his lightest day. One morning meeting, a working lunch with the Singapore team by video, 2 hours of uninterrupted reading in the afternoon. He had structured it deliberately, a reset point in the middle of the week that kept everything else running cleanly. His assistant, Petra, knew not to add to Wednesdays without direct instruction. The office on Wednesdays had a specific quality of quiet that he had come to rely on. He arrived at 7:40. Black coffee, no sugar, waiting on his desk. Morning briefing at 8, 10 minutes, standing, no chairs. Market review, flagged correspondence, 2 decisions made before 8:15. The meeting cleared by 8:20. He sat down, opened the day's first document, and worked without interruption for 2.5 hours. At 10:50, he stood, stretched, walked to the window. 32 floors below,
Art
the
has the
city was
power
doing
to
what cities
transform how
always
we see
did,
the world.
moving, requiring,
Each piece tells a
consuming.
story,
He had
evoking
long
deep
since stopped
emotions.
feeling anything about
I invite
that
you to
view.
explore
It was
and feel the
information.
connection.
The city was large. He was one part of it. He had found a way to be an important part, which was all that had ever mattered to him. He returned to his desk at 10:53. His phone, personal, not business, was face down beside his laptop. He turned it over and found something waiting that had not been there 2 hours ago. One message. Unknown number. He almost cleared it without reading. Spam reached his personal line occasionally despite filters, usually a number that looked local, usually a prompt that tried to seem urgent. He had a habit of deleting without opening. His thumb was already moving. Then he read the preview, just the first line, visible without opening. They're hurting my mom. He stopped. He looked at the screen. The sender ID showed a number he didn't recognize. No name, no location flag. 5 words, no context, no demand, no follow-up message below it. He opened it. The full message was exactly what the preview suggested. Nothing more. They're hurting my mom. Please. I didn't know who else to text. That was all. He read it twice, looked at the number again, ran it against nothing in his memory. It wasn't saved. He set the phone down. He told himself it was a wrong number. The most logical explanation. Someone had typed a digit incorrectly in a moment of fear and sent a message intended for someone else to a stranger's line. It happened. He knew it happened. He picked up his coffee. He set it down without drinking. He looked at the phone. 5 words sat in his chest like something lodged there, uncomfortable, resistant to removal. They're hurting my mom. He didn't reply. Not immediately. He put the phone face down again and spent 11 minutes trying to return to the document on his screen. He moved the cursor. He read the same paragraph 4 times and retained none of it. He stood, walked to the window, stood there for a moment looking at the street below without processing any of it. The message had no identifying information, no name, no address, no indication of who was hurting whom or how or what kind of hurting was meant. It was possible the word hurt was figurative, an argument, an emotional wound, the language of a distressed child exaggerating a domestic tension. It was possible the whole thing was misdirected and entirely someone else's problem to solve. All of that was true. He knew all of that. He returned to his desk. He opened the message again. I didn't know who else to text. That line. That was the line that wouldn't move. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. It was the opposite of dramatic. It was small and direct and completely without manipulation. Whoever had written this had not been trying to pull at anything. They had simply run out of options and reached for something that turned out to be him. He looked at the number again, and this time, slowly, without urgency, he tried to remember where he had seen it before. He almost let it go 3 times. The first time was when Petra knocked and brought in the afternoon briefing. The clean rhythm of the day reasserting itself, pulling him back into the structure that made sense. He had responsibilities. He had a company. He had a schedule built on the principle that distractions were chosen, not stumbled into. The second time was when his phone lit up with a call from his lawyer. Something minor requiring a signature, nothing complex, but enough to carry his attention for 20 minutes. Normal things, real things. Things that had weight and shape and belonged to him. And the third time was simply a decision, a clean, practical decision that he made sitting at his desk at 2:45. This is not mine to carry. A wrong number in a moment of crisis. Someone would help them. People had networks, neighbors, actual connections to turn to. He was not those things. He placed the phone in the desk drawer. He worked for 40 minutes. At 3:27, he opened the drawer and took the phone back out. He looked at the number. Something about it, not the digits themselves but the area code prefix, sat at the edge of something he couldn't name. He had seen that prefix before. Not often, specific enough to narrow things. He opened his contacts. He began, slowly, to look. It took him longer than it should have. His personal contacts were sparse. He did not collect people the way some did not maintain broad social networks or keep numbers beyond their usefulness. But he had the memory for detail that came with a mind built for pattern recognition, and something about those first 4 digits kept pressing. He moved through the list systematically. Business contacts first, eliminated quickly, wrong geography, personal. Shorter, faster. And then he found it, not the number itself, but a saved contact from 7 years ago that shared the same area code. A prefix specific to one district of one city. A place he had been briefly during a period of his life he had not thought about in years. He sat with that for a moment. The city, the time. He had been there for 8 months on an expansion project, a chapter of his life that had existed before Gray Capital reached its current scale. He had lived differently then, less structured, more present. He had known people there.
Stop right there!
One person,
Leave me
more
alone!
specifically,
You can't
in the way
escape!
that one person becomes
Get away from
specific
me!
when all the others remain general. He hadn't allowed himself to think about her in a long time. He had been very disciplined about that. The message was probably still a wrong number. But his hands were already moving, typing the prefix into a search, starting to trace it back. He told himself he was doing due diligence. That was the word he used internally, due diligence. It was a professional term applied to a personal situation, which meant he already knew it wasn't really professional. He found the district registered to the area code, cross-referenced it with what he knew of the city's geography. It matched the neighborhood he had lived in during those 8 months. He sat back. It was still circumstantial. Area codes were shared across wide districts. Hundreds of thousands of people could send a message from that prefix and have nothing to do with anyone he had ever known. He was reaching. He knew he was reaching. He opened the message again. Read the whole thing one more time. They're hurting my mom. Please. I didn't know who else to text. The writing was a child's writing, not the vocabulary, but the rhythm of it. Short, direct, stripped of everything except the essential. The way children communicate when they are frightened and trying to be brave. He thought about the child on the other end of this message, sitting with a phone, typing carefully, choosing him, a wrong number, a stranger, because the right number hadn't been available, or because the right number no longer existed in the right way. He made a decision. He typed back. Who is this? Are you safe? The reply took 9 minutes. He watched the screen. At the 7-minute mark, he told himself to put the phone down. At the 8-minute mark, he told himself the child had found help elsewhere and this was already resolved. At 9 minutes, the message came. My name is Iris. I'm okay for now. Mom isn't. I'm sorry if I sent this to the wrong person. I found this number in Mom's old phone. Ronan read it twice, then a third time, Mom's old phone. Not a missed dial, not a randomly typed digit, a number that had existed in someone's phone. Someone's old phone, meaning a number that had been stored deliberately at some point in the past. He was in someone's contacts, he just didn't know whose. He typed, "You didn't send it to the wrong person. How old are you, Iris?" The reply came faster this time. 10. He absorbed that. A 10-year-old had gone through her mother's old phone looking for someone to call. That image, small hands, an old device, scrolling through contacts from a life before, moved through him in a way he didn't try to stop. He typed, "What's your mom's name?" He already had a feeling. He was already, without fully admitting it, bracing for the answer. The reply came after 4 minutes, long enough that he wondered if the child had put the phone down, if someone had come into the room, if the situation had shifted. Then, "Her name is Vera. Vera Calloway." He put his phone face down on the desk. He pressed both palms flat on the surface and looked at the wall across from him. Vera. Vera Calloway. He had not said her name aloud in 7 years. He had not permitted himself to think it with any frequency, a discipline he had practiced and mostly maintained. She had been 29 when he last saw her. She would be 36 now. In the 8 months he had spent in that city, she had been everything that didn't fit his plan. The one person who had made the structure feel temporary. He had left because the structure mattered more. He had chosen the company over the city, the plan over the person, the future he had designed over the one that was quietly offering itself. He had told himself she would be fine. He had told himself she had resources, a life, people around her.
It's not
He had
what it
told
looks
himself
like.
all of it.
Then
He had
explain
also,
the cut on
in
your
the clean,
face.
sealed
I was
compartment where he kept
protecting
things
you.
that didn't fit,
By risking your
known that
life?
he was choosing
I
the
had no
easy
choice.
direction. His phone screen lit up again. She was okay for a long time, but things changed. He turned the phone over. He typed, "What kind of hurting, Iris? I need to understand." A pause. Then, "The landlord, he keeps coming. He says we owe more than we do. He brings people with him. They were loud last night. Mom tried to talk to them, but they wouldn't stop." She was scared. He read it carefully, not a metaphor, not an argument. A predatory landlord, intimidation, financial pressure, physical presence used as a tool. He knew what that looked like. He had been on the other side of it in early years, watching investors use presence and volume to collapse people who had less power and fewer options. He felt something shift in his chest. Not softness, something harder and more directional. Something that had a shape and wanted to move. He typed, "Has anyone been physically hurt?" "Not yet. But Mom cried last night after they left. She doesn't usually cry." He sat with that last sentence. She doesn't usually cry. The specific, heartbreaking observation of a child who monitors their parents' emotions as a form of survival, who knows the difference between their mother's usual and their mother's breaking. He thought of Vera, the version he remembered, steady, practical, quick to laugh, slow to ask for help. She wouldn't have cried easily. He typed, "Can you tell me your address, Iris? I'm not going to ignore this." She didn't give him the address immediately. She asked, "How do you know my mom?" He appreciated that. A 10-year-old, frightened, reaching out to a stranger, and still careful enough to ask. He typed, "We were friends a long time ago. I want to help, but I understand if you need to check with her first." A long pause. 5 minutes. 6. Then, "She's sleeping. She was up most of the night. I don't want to wake her." He typed, "That's okay. You don't have to give me the address, but if you can, I'd like to make some calls today." Another pause. Then the address came. He read it. Sat with it. The city was 3 hours away. Not impossible. He had a driver. He had a jet if the situation required one. He had resources that could move quickly when directed. He called Petra on the office line. "I need you to pull everything you can find on a property address." He read it out. Ownership history, current landlord registration, any complaints filed through housing authorities in the last 12 months. Petra didn't ask why. That was one of her gifts. "Give me 2 hours," she said. He hung up. He looked at his phone. He typed to Iris, "I'm making some calls. Don't worry about anything right now. Is your mom okay for today?" The reply, "I think so. She's still sleeping." He typed, "Good. Let her sleep." Petra called back in 90 minutes. Her voice carried the specific, careful quality it took on when she had found something she knew he wouldn't like. "The property is registered to a holding company, 3 layers deep. Shell structure, which is unusual for residential rental." "How unusual?" This is a 12-unit building. The ownership structure is the kind you'd use to obscure a commercial portfolio worth 50 times the property value. Someone is using it for something else. What kind of something else? I can't confirm yet, but there are 4 unresolved complaints filed with the Housing Authority in the last 8 months. Harassment, illegal entry, pressure to vacate. 2 tenants have already left, both below market value on their leases. Ronan was quiet. He had seen this before. Not personally, at a distance, through the financial structures he moved through daily. A building in a rising neighborhood. A landlord who wanted it empty. Tenants who had rights but not power, leases but not lawyers, and no one in their corner with the tools to push back. He thought about Vera. 36, a child to protect, probably no savings to speak of. A person who had been living her life carefully and been targeted because careful people had less room to fight back. I want the name behind the holding company, he said. I'll find it, Petra said. The name took until morning. He didn't sleep well. He had moved the call with Singapore, cleared Thursday's schedule with 3 hours' notice, and received no fewer than 4 messages from colleagues responding to his sudden inaccessibility with varying degrees of concern. He ignored all of them. The name behind the holding company was a man called Derek Paulson, mid-50s, low public profile, a quiet history of acquiring residential buildings in gentrifying areas and clearing them through pressure rather than legal process. He had faced 2 complaints in a different city 6 years ago. Both were settled out of court. Both included NDAs. Ronan read the file Petra compiled, 6 pages, thorough, at 5 in the morning in his kitchen with cold coffee and the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for high-stakes acquisitions. He thought about the word settled. He knew what that meant in practice. It meant Paulson had enough money to make problems disappear before they became public record. It meant he had done this before and expected to keep doing it. It meant Vera and her neighbors were facing something that had worked on other people, which made it dangerous in a specific, experienced way. He texted Iris at 7:15. I know more now. I'm coming today. Don't tell your mom yet. I want to see the situation first. Is that okay? The reply came at 7:22. Okay, I'll be home after school. He left the city at 9. He drove himself, unusual. He needed the quiet, the road, the 3 hours without anyone else in the space. He played no music. He let the drive be what it was, a movement toward something he had spent 7 years moving away from. He thought about the last time he had seen her. It hadn't been dramatic. That had always been the part he couldn't cleanly file away. How undramatic it had been. He had told her he was leaving. She had nodded. She had said she understood, and he had believed her, and he had driven away from that city with the window down, and his future precisely mapped in front of him. He had not looked in the mirror. That had been intentional. He had made a lot of intentional decisions in that period. All of them logical, most of them right in the ways that showed up in quarterly reports and property values and the kind of professional profile that financial journalists found compelling. None of them had produced anything that felt the way those 8 months had felt. He had buried that observation years ago. It was surfacing now, on a highway 3 hours from where he had left it, with the specific force of something that had not actually been buried at all, just waiting for the right weight to push it back up. He arrived at 2:40. The building was older than the neighborhood around it. 3 stories, brick, the kind of structure that had been standing for 50 years while the streets beside it changed twice. He parked and sat in the car for a moment. He looked at the front door. He thought about what Iris's message had described. Men at the door, raised voices, her mother frightened but standing her ground, crying afterward when the ground had cost too much. He got out. He had a plan, or the outline of one. He had a lawyer he could call within the hour. He had documentation on Paulson that could move through housing channels faster than standard process because he knew which channels to use. He had resources that could turn a shell company into a public liability if pressed in the right direction. He had all of this, and it was real, and it would help. But walking toward this building, he understood something he had not fully admitted when he made the drive. He was not only here for Vera. He was here because 7 years ago he had made a decision that was entirely about himself, and he had called it clarity, and he had lived with that framing for long enough. He knocked on the door of apartment 4. He heard small footsteps. Then the door opened. Iris looked up at him with wide, steady, carefully composed eyes and said, "You actually came." "I said I would," he said. She looked at him for a moment, assessing the way children assess adults who claim to be trustworthy. Then she stepped aside. He came in. The apartment was small but kept, not in the performing cleanliness way of someone trying to impress, just genuinely maintained. Bookshelves. A child's drawings pinned to a corkboard. A kitchen that smelled faintly of something cooked recently. He stood in the entryway and heard, from the back of the apartment, a door open. He had prepared for this moment, and the preparation dissolved immediately when she came down the hallway. 7 years. She was different in the ways that 7 years produce. The specific, settled quality of a person who has moved through difficulty and found ground on the other side. But her eyes were the same, and the way they stopped when they landed on him was a thing he felt in his sternum. Ronan. Flat. Not cold. Just absorbing the shock of it with the composure of a woman who had learned to absorb a great many things. "Vera." She looked at Iris. Iris looked at the floor. "You went through my old phone," Vera said quietly. "Yes," Iris said. No apology, but not defiant either, just honest. Vera looked back at Ronan. He said, "She was trying to help you." Vera's jaw tightened once. "I didn't need." "I know you didn't need it," he said. She didn't know that. He didn't make it about the past. He had decided that on the drive, this moment was about the situation, not the history. He asked Vera to sit. She didn't, at first. She stood in her kitchen with her arms crossed, not hostile, just protecting herself, which was fair. He laid out what he had, Paulson's name, the shell company, the pattern of complaints across multiple properties, the 2 settlements. She listened. Her expression moved through several things: surprise, recognition, something that looked like relief that someone had named it out loud. "I knew it wasn't just about rent," she said. "He's done this before? Multiple times. It works because tenants don't have the tools to fight back." She was quiet for a moment. Iris sat at the kitchen table, listening with the careful attention of a child who had called this meeting and intended to take it seriously. "What can you do?" Vera asked. Not gratefully. Practically. He respected that. "I have a lawyer, housing specialist. I can have her here tomorrow if you want. I can also move through the corporate filings to expose the shell structure publicly, which removes his ability to operate quietly. Once it's public, his financing options shrink significantly." Vera looked at him. "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because I can." She shook her head. "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It isn't." Iris was sent to her room at 6 o'clock. Not as a punishment, Vera made clear. As a courtesy. Iris went without argument, which suggested she understood the room needed to hold something she wasn't part of. Vera made tea. He didn't ask for it. She made it anyway, the automatic hospitality of someone who needed something to do with her hands. They sat across the small kitchen table. The city outside the window was settling into evening. "You didn't have to come," she said. "No. You could have made calls from wherever you were." "Yes." She looked at her cup. "Then why?" "Because I owed you a presence," he said. "Not a phone call." She was still for a moment. "Then, you left, Ronan. You made a decision and you left, and you were completely unreachable after that. Not unkind, just gone." He took that. Didn't deflect it. "I know. I was fine," she said. And then more quietly, "But it wasn't easy. And Iris has grown up she's grown up knowing the world is something you navigate mostly alone." He looked at
I
the
can't
hallway
keep
where
avoiding
Iris had
this.
disappeared.
The decisions
"She's
I made
remarkable."
haunt me.
"She is,"
But
Vera said
tonight,
simply.
I face them.
"She did this herself.
No more
Found the
running.
number, sent the message. She's been managing more than she should have to." His throat tightened. "How long has it been like this?" She looked at him steadily. "Long enough?" she said. He stayed until 9. He called his lawyer, Alina, direct and efficient, and put her on speaker, so Vera could hear the plan laid out clearly. Alina confirmed she could be there by 10 the following morning. She had dealt with Paulson-style operators before. She used the word before with the quiet certainty of someone who had won those cases. When the call ended, Vera sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling briefly. the specific exhale of someone who has been holding their breath for a long time. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. Then she said, "Iris is going to want to see you again." He looked up. "Is that okay with you?" She considered it. Not quickly. She gave it the full weight of the question. "I think," she said slowly, "that it depends on what you're prepared to actually offer. Not money or lawyers. That's all useful. I mean presence." "I know what you mean." She's 10. She doesn't do well with people who arrive and then disappear. He looked at his hands on the table. 7 years ago, he had told himself leaving was clarity. He could see now, with the ordinary lighting of her kitchen around him, that clarity had been a more flattering word for fear. He said, "I don't want to disappear again." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then don't," she said simply. He drove back the next morning. After Elena's meeting, after the documents were filed, after Vera had been given the kind of concrete legal protection that made Paulson's options significantly smaller and considerably
You seem
more
quiet.
public.
Everything
He
okay?
left with her number,
It's a
her
little
current
hard.
one, the one she gave
Let me
him
help you.
directly.
We'll do it
Not
together.
from an old
Okay,
phone.
thank you.
Directly, standing
Of
at the
course.
door, Iris beside her with the watchful steadiness of a child measuring whether an adult was going to do what they said. He had looked at Iris and said, "I'll call this week." She had said, "Okay." Not with the softness of relief, with the careful neutrality of someone who was not yet ready to be relieved. He respected that. He drove back through the same countryside he'd come through the day before, and it looked entirely different. Not the road. The road was the same. Something else had shifted. He returned to his office on Friday afternoon. Petra had managed everything without instruction, the way she always did. The building hummed with its usual precision. He walked to the window. The city below moved the way cities moved, enormous, indifferent, carrying on. He looked at it differently than he had on Wednesday morning, not because it had changed, because he had been somewhere that reminded him that the things which could not be structured or controlled or filed away neatly were, more often than not, the only things that truly counted.